Milk paint and chalk paint get lumped together because they both live in that matte, furniture-friendly universe. But they're not the same animal. One tends to sink into the surface and behave like a finish that becomes part of the piece. The other tends to sit on top and behave like a coating you can steer toward a very controlled result. If you're trying to choose between them, the trick isn't memorizing a list of pros and cons. Here's what matters: what you're painting, how you want it to look after 6 months of real life, and how much you enjoy surprises. What they are. Milk paint, in the traditional sense, comes from an older formula built around milk protein and mineral ingredients. The vibe is earthy and straightforward, more like mixing something than opening a can of modern wall paint. Chalk paint is a modern category name for paints designed to dry matte and grab onto furniture without you doing a lot of prep. Different brands use different formulas, but the user experience is usually consistent. Open the container, stir, paint, admire the velvety finish. Mixing and prep. Milk paint often asks you to participate. If it comes as a powder, you mix it with water, wait a bit, and mix again, because it can clump at first and then smooth out. That small ritual matters because it changes how you think about the process. You're making a finish, not just applying one. Chalk paint is more plug and play. Stir, paint, move on. Prep-wise, both can be forgiving, but forgiving doesn't mean magical. Grease, silicone polishes, and mystery waxes can make either paint misbehave, so cleaning is still non-negotiable if you want a finish you can trust. Adhesion and bonding. This is where the personality difference shows up. Milk paint likes porous surfaces. Raw wood and unfinished pieces are where it can feel like it's bonding rather than just covering. On slick surfaces or certain old finishes, it can resist in a way that turns into that classic chippy look. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you absolutely do not. Chalk paint tends to be more predictable across mixed surfaces. It behaves like a coating with strong grip, which is why people reach for it on previously painted furniture or pieces that have a little history but not enough clarity about what's under the hood. Finish and look. Milk paint has a quieter kind of beauty. It can look powdery, mineral, almost like it's been there for decades. It often has subtle variation that reads as depth, not unevenness. Chalk paint has its own signature, a soft, matte, almost velour look that photographs well and feels intentional. If you're chasing authentic antique energy, milk paint can get you there faster. If you're chasing clean matte modern vintage, chalk paint tends to cooperate. Coverage and opacity. Chalk paint usually covers faster. One coat can look surprisingly solid, especially in mid-tone colors. Milk paint can be more transparent or uneven on the first coat, then builds character with the second and third. That's not a flaw, it's just the nature of the finish. The question is whether you want fast, uniform opacity or a layered look that feels more like a stain and paint hybrid. Bottom line, if you hate the feeling of needing one more coat, chalk paint is often the calmer choice. Chipping and distressing control. Milk paint is famous for chipping, but the more important point is control. Sometimes it chips exactly where you want, like edges and corners that would naturally wear. Sometimes it chips where you didn't plan, and you're suddenly negotiating with the piece instead of directing it. Chalk paint distressing is usually more under your control. You can sand edges, scuff high points, and decide how far to take it. With milk paint, the surface can decide with you. If you like that collaboration, it's fun. If you want certainty, chalk paint is the safer bet. Dry time and working time. Both tend to dry fairly quickly to the touch, which is great until it's not. With chalk paint, quick drying means you can move fast, but it can also mean you need to keep a wet edge if you're trying to avoid brush marks. Milk paint can feel like it sets into the surface quickly, and because it's so matte, it can hide minor marks while also making certain overlaps show as tonal shifts. Let me explain the practical takeaway. Whichever you pick, plan your sections and keep your pace steady. Fast paint rewards confident application. Sealing and top coats. This is where people get sloppy, then blame the paint. Milk paint is porous. Chalk paint is also typically porous, or at least matte enough that it wants protection on anything that gets handled. If the piece is decorative and won't be touched much, you can sometimes leave it unsealed, but it will mark and scuff more easily. If the piece is a table, kitchen chair, cabinet door, or anything that sees hands, oils, and wiping, top coat isn't optional. It's part of the system. Wax can give a soft feel and gentle sheen, but it's not always the best for heat, water, or heavy wear. A clear water-based top coat can offer a more practical shield, though the look and feel will change slightly. This is the trade. The more you protect, the more you may move away from that raw, ultra-matte charm. Durability in real life. Paint durability isn't just about the paint. It's paint plus surface prep, plus top coat, plus how the object is used. Milk paint, when it's truly bonded into a porous surface and sealed appropriately, can age beautifully. It can wear in a way that looks like time rather than damage. Chalk paint can be very durable too, especially when paired with a good top coat, and it tends to resist random flaking because it's designed to coat consistently. If the piece is going to live a rough life, chalk paint with a practical top coat is usually the more predictable path. If the piece is meant to look like it's had a life, milk paint can create that story without forcing it. Best surfaces and worst surfaces. Milk paint loves raw wood, unfinished pieces, and anything you want to feel organic. It can be amazing on old, thirsty wood, where modern paint can look a bit too plastic. Where it struggles is slick, sealed, glossy surfaces, unless you intentionally want chipping or you use a bonding strategy. Chalk paint is the all-rounder. Previously painted furniture, lightly scuffed varnish, mixed material pieces, even metal with proper prep, it often behaves. That said, chalk paint can still fail if the surface is contaminated or glossy and untouched. No paint is a substitute for cleaning, and a little abrasion when the surface demands it. Color, sheen, and the feel of the piece. Both paints tend to live in the matte family, which is why they're popular for furniture. But their matte is different. Milk paint matte can feel like mineral dust in a good way, like the color is embedded. Chalk paint matte can feel like velvet on the surface, like a skin. And here's a subtle point people notice later. Top coats change everything. A waxed chalk paint piece can feel smooth and buttery. A poly top-coated piece can feel more like a conventional painted finish. Milk paint can swing from raw and chalky to softly sheened depending on how you seal it. Decide the tactile goal early. It saves you from that moment where you love the color but hate the feel. Ease of use for beginners. If someone wants a low-stress first furniture project, chalk paint tends to be kinder. It's forgiving, consistent, and the learning curve is gentle. Milk paint is easy in the sense that it's not complicated, but it can be moody depending on surface, mixing, and expectations. Beginners can absolutely use it, but they should want the specific look milk paint gives. If the goal is simply paint this dresser and have it look nice, chalk paint will usually get there faster with fewer surprises. Cost and waste. Prices vary by brand and region, so the honest statement is that either can be expensive or reasonable. What matters more is waste. Pre-mixed paint is convenient, but you might pour out more than you use, especially on small jobs. Powdered milk paint can be mixed in small batches, which can reduce waste if you're disciplined about it. On the other hand, mixing wrong or mixing too much can create its own waste. The practical approach is simple. Choose the system you'll actually use well. Cheap paint that you mess up twice is not cheap. When to choose milk paint. Choose milk paint when you want a finish that looks like it belongs on the piece, not like something applied last weekend. Choose it when you want gentle variation, when you're okay with a bit of unpredictability, and when the surface is porous enough to let it do its thing. It's also a strong choice when you want an aged look without fake distressing. The paint can create honest wear patterns, and that can look incredibly convincing. When to choose chalk paint. Choose chalk paint when you want control. When you want fast coverage, consistent behavior, and a finish you can repeat across multiple pieces. It's great for furniture flips, for matching sets, for projects where you don't want to negotiate with the surface. It's also great when the piece has unknown layers under it, and you want a paint that generally grips well once cleaned and lightly scuffed. If the goal is a clean, matte transformation with minimal drama, chalk paint is usually the move. Bottom line, milk paint is about character, depth, and the way it merges with the material. Chalk paint is about simplicity, predictability, and getting a beautiful matte finish with less fuss. Both can look high-end. Both can look awful if you skip cleaning, rush the coat, or ignore protection on a high-use surface. The smartest choice is the one that matches the story you want the piece to tell and the amount of control you want over the ending. Want the comparison titles exactly as you have them in your outline? Paste them. Or should these headings be the final set?